Hi, we're group six, and we decided to code Farkle as our dice game. I'm Jordan Vallodolid.
I'm Anthony Mock.
I'm Philippos Drymiotis.
I'm Kiran Shirish.
First off, we have our rules button and our dice and our background button in the top right as soon as you open the program. Um, Pretty straightforward. You open the rules and they'll tell you the rules of Farkle if you're not familiar with it. So this will get you rolling if you've never played the game before. The background is a nice little feature that we added to change the background to your liking, whether or not you want a farm, an ocean, or a space background. You know, we just want to make sure that you have the best experience playing Farkle. So the GUI that I covered in the project is relatively straightforward. As you can see, we have our turn score and our total score for the two players who are playing, and then we have our, it says reset right now, but this is our start button. And then we have our two lamps that indicate which player is currently rolling. Um, we also have our roll, our bank, and our end turn button. Our six dice down here are simple dice, PNGs, and we have our own animation for them. And yeah, we'll just show you what the game looks like when you win. So I'm going to bank here, and then I'm going to end my turn. Here comes the money. And after that, you can reset and start again. And you roll, and you choose whichever ones you want to bank. And then you rinse and repeat and turn. So here I'm going to show you an example of what I implemented in the case that a player gets a Farkle during the game. So I'm going to roll. So after that, you lose your points, and then it goes, your points get reset, and then the turn goes back to the other player. Well, they'll start rolling again.
All right, I'm going to go over what happens when the roll button is pushed. Basically, this will make sure that all the checkboxes are unmarked, which is why we have them set equal to 0. And then automatically we will set off the roll animate function. And I will go over what that does as well. This function is what we created to make the dice roll, the animation feature. So it plays a sound, and then we create a dice images array for each image that we have. So this image has 1 dice, this has 2 dice on it, this has 3 dice, so on and so forth. And then we created a for loop to shuffle between each image 4 times. If a dice button is not banked, then it will be enabled, and then after it is enabled, it will shuffle between the 6 images. So that's what we have for each dice button. So that's why we have dice 1, dice 2 button, dice 3. And then between each shuffle, it will pause for 0.1 seconds. After the rolling dice is animated, it will match each image to the number that is randomly generated for each dice box. So for example, here, this is the first dice box. If a number 2 is randomly generated, then it will match it with the image that has 2 dice on it. Another example, if this is for the fourth dice box, if a number 6 is randomly generated, then it will have the image with 6 dice pop up on that dice box. Towards the end, we will check if a Farkle occurs. It'll play the Farkle function, else it will just enable the bank button if it is not a Farkle, and they'll be able to keep playing and keep rolling.
So the first feature that I'm going to be talking about is the calculate score function. And so the way we did it is by counting up the number of 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5, and 6s for each dice roll. And then this is the code we use to count all of them up. And then we use the turn score feature and the turn score variable in order to track the score. And that's kind of the thing we're adding to it as we check for all the things that would give you points with the dice combinations, the melds. And then we check for 3 of a kind again. It's pretty easy once you know the number of each roll. And then we put them into an array just to sort them easier because that gives us access to the max function and the sum function. So to find the 4, 5, 6 of a kind, we can use the max function and see if it's 4, 5, or 6, and then add them the points as they need. And then for the straight, 3 pairs, 2 triplets, and 4 of a kind in pair, we use the sum feature. and we were summing up all of the individual values of the array, and that kind of allows us to use the coding logic to add the appropriate number of points if there's any of these melts. Another feature that was pretty important was the checking if the player farkles. Here it is. And so this is pretty important because we need to do it every turn. And again, if the Farkle happens, then there's the big rules or the big dog that comes up, and the turn is ended there. And then finally, I'm going to go over the rules really quick. Just very short. There's only one line. It's just showing the image of the instructions that we had in case you don't know how to play Farkle and what the melds are.
Okay, so I'll be going over the components I coded and implemented. First, we'll start with the start/reset button. Pretty much when you hit the start button, a sound plays, the player 1 lamp turns on, and the score table gets initialized, and the game starts, so player 1 is able to roll the dice. The start button then turns into a reset button, and if they hit that, it pretty much disables all the lights from the lamps, it zeroes the entire table so that no one has score, and every button gets disabled, and then the reset button turns back into the start button. I'll then go over the bank button. So pretty much after checking the dice the player wants to bank, the player can then hit the bank button. These if statements add the check dice to a check dice logical array, which is right here. And the check dice array is then turned into the bank dice for the values. And then the bank dice is then used within the calculate score function to determine the turn score, which is then added to the current turn score. I also added a small part where if they hit the bank button without having any check dice, it does nothing, and then it won't let them continue until they check dice for their roll. I then add the points to the turn score of the player, depending on whose lamp is lit up. I make sure that if I also made sure that if the player was able to bank every dice, it would automatically switch to the next player's turn through the switch turns app, which I will cover next. The switch turn function basically adds up all the points from the player's current turn score to the total score for the designated player. This is determined whether the player 1 lamp is enabled or the player 2 lamp is enabled. And pretty much every dice value gets reset so that the next player then gets a fresh turn to start off on. Within this function, we also have the win condition of 10,000 points. And pretty much if a player reaches 10,000 points, a sound will play along with a banner displaying the player who won. It will then also go into an endgame function, which basically disables all the buttons except the reset button. Lastly, we have the Farkle function, which pretty much happens when there is no scoring combination. Here we zero the player's turn points, and then we also play 2 soundtracks along with making the GIF visible to indicate that they have Farkled. It then pretty much switches the players and does the same thing as a switch turn function. Okay, so in our final code, we were not actually able to implement the ThingSpeak feature, but this is our attempts at doing it. So we added a online switch to the app, and one of the players would select player 1, the other would select player 2, and then only on one of the apps it would turn to start. So in our old code, we had this online switch value, which if it was online, it would show player 1 button and player 2 button. And then if one of these buttons were hit, it would fill in a field with a number for player 1, and then the same thing would happen for player 2, but in a different field. And then pretty much I had these if statements that if these 2 fields were the same, or they equal the same value, the game would attempt to start.